Hey everyone, well, here we are at episode 12. I'm so glad so many of you are enjoying this, even as it has evolved to me being out of the bakery since 2015. I still have so many stories to share, especially this one, a vegan with backyard chickens. Am I even vegan anymore? Well, I do love the comments from those of you who are hooked on this series and waiting patiently for the next episode. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to this one, but life gets crazy sometimes. And then Easter was here and I was cooking for days. And of course, I made too much food as usual. I always think I'm cooking for like 20 people and it was actually just 5 of us. But nonetheless, it was so great and delicious. And who doesn't love eggplant parm leftovers for days and chocolate mousse cake? So anyway, we left off the last one with me basically bringing my chaotic stories about my life full circle from all the decades of nightmare experiences in both my business and my personal relationships. And yay me, I finally in the last couple of years figured it out and I got everything I ever dreamed of, and I was married on March 11th to the most wonderful man I have ever known, which if you listened to the last one, you know that I almost couldn't even handle how amazing he is, because this type of relationship is just so foreign to me. But thankfully I worked through some stuff, and more importantly, he stayed while I worked through some stuff. And well, here we are. But the big cliffhanger was that I also ended the last one where I began to talk all about my life now and how I have a different kind of chaos in my life because we now have backyard chickens. Does that mean I'm not even vegan anymore? But before I get into all of this, I thought that it would be useful to point out a comment from one viewer on the last video and their take on backyard chickens. And it's funny because my research years earlier about this brought me to almost exactly what this one viewer cited. So I guess we were both getting our information from the same source. Well, let me just read the comment here. It said, "Dear Gretchen, as to the backyard chickens, from what I understand, and maybe you do too, is that although you may give them a good life, taking eggs from them is not natural for them or for you. Chickens would normally lay only 12 eggs per year, and they would sometimes eat the unfertilized eggs for their own nourishment to gain the vitamins and nutrients they need to be healthy. When eggs are removed for a human to eat them, the chicken will lay another egg to compensate for that missing egg, and this will continue to happen. A new egg gets laid for the missing egg. And this is where the unnatural part comes in. The chicken is not built to lay all those extra eggs, and therefore stress is put on their bodies when they do. Eggs are not laid for us, just as a cow does not produce milk for us. I hope that I explained it well enough, and I don't want to preach to a vegan who is already sympathetic to animals' welfare, but I guess we are all constantly learning new things in our journeys, and maybe this is something new for you and others to know." So I really do appreciate this comment, and as I said, this is basically the exact same information that I gathered in my years earlier search about why backyard chickens are a no. But I never really understood it. I just really thought that the chickens would have such a beautiful life compared to those in a factory farm situation where they're just stuffed into cages or stuffed into a horrific warehouse piled on top of each other. Now, I do want to say, again, I mentioned it in the last one, but for those who didn't listen to that one, I'm not eating the eggs. I have no desire after almost a decade of not eating them that I just never really missed eggs after all of this time. But my husband, and it still feels really weird saying that, he eats eggs every day. And although he doesn't eat any of the other animals, well, that's not true. He'll eat the occasional fish dinner now and again if he goes out to eat or something, but he was very strong in his assertion that he was not going to stop eating eggs. So I explained all about that one in the last one, which brought us to this decision to actually get the backyard chickens. It was sort of like a happy medium. I couldn't stand actually buying the eggs from factory farms, and it was sort of like, all right, then let's just take care of our own. So anyway, I just really always couldn't understand the reason why backyard chickens are frowned upon, at least from a vegan standpoint. I would love them and take care of them just like I do my cats or any other animal that crosses my path. So I just really didn't get it. It's not like we'd be raising them to kill them. So as I go through this experience and talk about my newfound understanding, I think the biggest part of all of this is to remember is that vegan is not a diet. Vegan is a way of life where we try to do as little harm to all living beings as possible, humans included. Now, this statement alone could actually open up a really huge conversation about basically everything. I know, believe me, I know, especially to the trolls who want to have a conversation called, "Do you know how many mice get killed while you're harvesting your vegetables, you terrible vegans?" Like, we could literally look at the way we live modern life inside out and upside down and find a problem with everything. It's sadly the way of the advanced world, in quotations, and there's just no getting around it. It seems that when something becomes mass produced, something else on the back end gets exploited. For example, like every time I see how much avocados we eat now compared to 10 years ago, I cringe. Now, I'm not saying there's something nefarious with the avocado industry. I don't even know if there is or not, but for some reason, when I see the gigantic pile of them in my one grocery store alone, multiply that by 1 million across just this country, I don't know. I just see things in such a bigger picture a lot of times. And it just makes me feel some kind of way. Like everything has gotten so far out of local living, if that makes sense. So I know I'm already spinning off into a really weird conversation, but believe me, I'm going to bring it back around. And it's just sort of to explain the way my thinking goes. For example, cashews. The way that cashews have to be harvested and manufactured is really shocking. And the cost to the poor people, literally poor people who do this job, is quite harmful. So in my last Storytime episode, I was actually talking about this same type of thing when I used my little bakery as an example. Each week I would get my delivery of hundreds of dozens of eggs and gallons upon gallons of milk and heavy cream and hundreds of pounds of cream cheese. And this was weekly, and this was just my small bakery. So just the sight of that would stop me in my tracks, and I would think, oh my God, what an unbelievable toll on these animals as we supply the demand of an evolved civilization, in quotes again, eye roll emoji. So that was eventually what made me switch to vegan over time, was just the realization of the absolute exploitation of these animals. So I guess that's a good thing, that the way that I look at things the way I do, since, many people would see that and never think about it at all. But I sort of do that with everything. I'm kind of a bummer. Like when I see all the coconut milk cans in the grocery store, I just think of the monkey slaves, which, again, exposure and awareness of things makes us do better when we know better, right? So now I only buy coconut milk from approved sources. So, to always go to the negative of everything, I admit it, it's a bummer. It's like, why can't I just enjoy everything instead of having to think of the downside of everything? But basically, I've come to learn that anytime there is human intervention on a mass level, there's going to be exploitation of nature, and it's just a real shame to me. So, all right, I'm already spinning off into some other territory that I said I didn't want to talk about. So let me just try to focus on the chicken story for right now. Although, strangely, you're going to see how this all ties into that same realization. All right, so now that I've experienced having chickens for almost a year now, from the process of actually going to get them all the way through to just having them for an entire year, my understanding is way deeper than just getting eggs for Frank to eat them. So I guess the first part of it in the comment that I read, where we have been told that these chickens only produce another egg because we take them. This has not been my experience. And I suppose I have to clarify the difference really quick between wildfowl, where I could see this as definitely being true, versus the backyard chickens that have been unnaturally bred over millennia to produce those hundreds of eggs a year. So in the wild, which I don't even know that there even is a real wild fowl on earth anymore, maybe in the jungles somewhere, but there certainly aren't any wild fowl laying in my backyard. So how do we get them? Well, we have to go buy them. And there is problem number one. These backyard chickens all came from the same place originally. And I know some people are going to argue me that no, I have backyard chickens that were born on my property from a hen that I already had. Yeah, believe me. Me too. How do you think I ended up with 20 of them at this point? And I'll get into that. But the original hens came from somewhere, right? And most likely you, like me, also bought them at some point, or you acquired them from someone who originally bought them from a breeder. Like basically, if you trace back the origin of where these backyard hens came from, you'll get back to a large breeder facility. So this was my biggest realization, and these domesticated egg-laying hens have been bred over centuries to lay 200 to 300 eggs a year, which takes a never-ending toll on their poor little bodies. Yes, that is absolutely true. And as the commenter pointed out, a wild fowl that has not been intervened upon by humans is probably only going to lay 12 to 15 a year, similar to a woman's menstrual cycle. After all, the egg in nature is intended for reproduction, not human consumption, when you look at it from a biological perspective and not a culinary one. So I will point out one thing in disagreement with the commenter, and maybe it's just that I'm maybe misunderstanding their actual point, but even if we let the eggs sit in the coop or in the grass or wherever they laid them, and I never touched the eggs, the hens are not going back and eating them, at least not mine, unless I scramble them up for them to eat, in which case they do eat them and they love that. But when we've left them sitting there in the grass for them to do whatever they want, they have not one time tried to break them or peck them or eat them. Now, I can't say if anyone else has that experience, but for me, this has not happened. But my bigger point here is that if I left them there for them and never took one single egg, they're not going to then revert back to a once a month egg laying cycle because they've been bred to lay hundreds of eggs a year. So I think even if I didn't go any further in my explanation than this, you can see right away that human intervention and the need to exploit everything natural is right there in boldface. And that is why it's not considered vegan. I get it now. But let's dive even deeper than that. As we drove 3 hours last year to get our 2-month-old little pullets and one rooster from who we were told from some neighbors was just a small guy, a backyard type operation who you could rely on for healthy chicks, that they're actually sexed, meaning that you are getting females and not males, which, as we know, males are not valued for much. And that's another topic I'll get into later. But you know, most people, when they're looking for backyard chickens, only want hens because those are the ones laying eggs, right? So we did our research. We made sure we picked the reputable chicken guy, and that's where we went. Now, he's a really nice guy. He's actually a school teacher, and he deals chickens on the side. He showed us his whole operation, and as I scoped out the scene and listened to him explaining all about his chicken business, I realized this is actually crazy. He is ordering his chicks through the mail, probably buys them in bulk, well, definitely buys them in bulk, from maybe like $1 to $3 each, and I'm guessing based on what I've read. And then he raises them to 2 months old, and then he sells them for $25 a hen to people like us. It's pretty typical to get hens at that age. 2 months old is when most people are giving them out. And, you could pretty much be sure if they're males or females at that point. And then they usually start laying at about 4 to 6 months old. So first of all, I was shocked to hear he was getting his live baby chicks delivered in the mail. But now I know that this is way more common than not. That's pretty much how everybody does it. And this is just one small guy in his backyard doing this. It was almost like the realization I had about my small bakery and just the exploitation of all the animals in that scenario. So imagine hundreds of thousands of other people across this country alone doing the same thing. All these baby chicks getting mailed out all over the place from one, or actually several, if not hundreds of giant breeding incubation farms across the country. And this is actually where I realized, okay, this is not just about taking chicken eggs. Not really. I started to understand the connection and why it's just a big no. So, it would have been very different had we rescued some chickens from a bad situation to then raise them to have a better life. But no, we bought them from a guy who will then buy more to replace those. And I came to find out he's actually pushing out thousands of hens a month. And this is just one small guy. So now just trace that back to the origins of that giant breeding farm. And that's how an industry perpetuates. So yeah, this is way bigger than just taking chicken eggs for your omelet. And I'm going to say that our first batch of hens that we got last year was 6 chickens and 1 rooster. And within 1 month, one of our little girls, Mocha, died. I opened up the coop in the morning and she was dead on the sand. Now, we suspect she had an impacted egg because she died so quickly. She was fine the day before and then in the morning, just dead. And that's the most typical way a hen will die from an impacted egg. It's like almost instant. It's like within 24 hours. So I think she just wasn't fully developed yet. Like her little reproduction system wasn't fully developed yet and her egg was ready and she wasn't. And of course, I can't be 100% sure this was the case without doing an autopsy. I mean, we couldn't know for sure, but this was really hard for me and sad. And of course, I mean, like I cry when I see a dragonfly come to the end of its life in my backyard. Like I'm that crazy person. So of course I cried and we buried her in the yard the same way that we honor all of our loved animals who pass. But then not long after that happened, another one of our girls started acting weird. And when a chicken is hurt or sick, they'll typically they don't show it. They'll be very still and they will sort of not be acting themselves and they don't hang out with the group anymore and they just sort of act lethargic. And so this was happening to my girl, Coco. Now, remember, I've never had chickens, but you can imagine I had been researching and looking at videos about everything and anything chicken related for months before we even got them. And then, of course, every day as I learned through about having them. But I couldn't really be sure what happened to her because it seems like every symptom and behavior presents the same for almost every chicken ailment. So, but she would let me pick her up, which is unusual because typically the hens don't really want to be picked up unless you raise them from tiny chicks. But I was able to give her an Epsom salt bath because at first I thought, oh no, we've got another impacted egg. And I learned that if you put them in a warm Epsom salt bath, it relaxes them and they're able to pass the egg easier. But it just seemed like she couldn't move around really well anymore. And, this went on for a week or at least 2 weeks. And so, like I said, it just turns out that all chicken ailments present the same. Like they just kind of stay to themselves. They don't want to be around the flock. They go lethargic. So my guess was as good as any, but I did everything I thought I should for her. I even tried to find a vet that would see her. I mean, I was getting crazy. That's the problem with somebody like me having backyard chickens because most people don't really value a chicken to the point that they would even bring one to a vet. I mean, First of all, there's no vets even near me that would see a chicken, so there's that. But most people just think nothing of killing a sick or a hurt bird. It's just not worth the energy to them. But me, oh my God, I was distraught. I was trying everything I could. I separated her from the flock. I was feeding her with a syringe. Like, I helped her and brought her into the grass to eat bugs and grass because her mobility was just like, at this point, she couldn't really walk anymore. So in retrospect, it turned out we think she hurt or fractured her hip jumping down from a high perch one day. And well, long, terrible story short, she ended up getting so bad with the pain that she was having seizures like right in front of my eyes. And Frank eventually had to do the most humane thing and put her down. Like, I know, it is such a contradiction, but you have no idea what that was like. I was sobbing all day and absolute wreck to see her in so much pain. And I was like, see, this is why we shouldn't have backyard chickens. This is not for me. I can't do this. Do your eggs really taste this good? Are they really worth this? Like, I was crazy. And this actually came like 2 weeks after my boy Teddy died. So it was all compiled, and I felt like a miserable failure to these animals. I was like, I can't do this. I can't help these animals. I mean, I cried for weeks about Ted, but then put on top of it Coco, the sweetest little hen there is, and I failed her. I couldn't help her. Not to mention, I mean, this wasn't easy for Frank. I mean, he puts spiders outside so that he doesn't have to kill them, and he was an absolute wreck because he's the one who had to do it. But, you know, there's a quote that I came across that said, where you have livestock, you will have dead stock. It just goes with the territory. So, you know, like, it's a horrifying and terrible experience to have to deal with. And, you know, the fact that this could happen at any time to any one of our birds is really daunting. And so this is huge reason number 2 why vegans don't have backyard chickens, because inevitably there's going to be a time where you may have to put one down. So I was just like, you know, I had not thought of any of this. I thought it was just going to be raising the most spoiled chickens in the history of chickens and rainbows and sprinkles again, right? Like, not seeing the downside to any of it until I actually had to experience it. Like, obviously, I was not aware or ready for this part of it, and no one was talking about it like this. Like I said, the main information that I got was about taking their eggs. And, you know, I'd never come across anything else. So, you know, the same information the commenter got, it was merely about how the hen is laying way more eggs than her little body ever should. So that was the extent of the information. And basically it all gets traced back to a huge industry of exploitation. But, you know, I'm full in it now. We now have 17 hens, and this was not something we planned for. Like I said, we went and got the original 6 hens to satisfy Frank's 4-egg-a-day habit, and we ended up with more because we had a rogue hen who literally flew the coop last September. Came back one day and I was like, oh my God, there's Sharon. She's not dead. She walked over to the chicken fenced yard and she was fat as a turkey and her tail feathers were splayed out. She was laser focused, and then she would poop this gigantic poop that was the size of a dog poop. And she would take a dust bath and then eat an enormous amount of food and drink. And this happened every 4 days like clockwork, because she would end up going back to wherever she was going. And so right around the same time, at about 11 o'clock on every 4th day, just when the sun got hot enough for her to leave her eggs. So it turns out she was sitting on eggs. This is the long story short. And she would leave her eggs for about a half an hour, and then she'd do this ritual with eating and drinking and sunbathing and pooping, and then she would go right back. And this went on for 21 days. Now, of course, I followed her and I found out where she'd been hiding her eggs, and it was under a shed on our property, and we never knew it. So all the while we thought she was dead, and she was actually fixing up to have babies. So, and that's because we have a rooster. Like, that's the other thing I learned. We really did not need to have this rooster. So, yeah, she had been flying up and out of the coop and hiding her eggs until the day she decided she had enough eggs and decided to start sitting on them. And this is what they call a hen going broody. And so this was back in September, and then 2 days after Halloween, she came home with 16 tiny babies. I was not prepared for this. I was like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with 16 tiny baby chicks? I had no heat lamps. Like, I had to scramble and learn really quickly what I was going to do. And so I set up a makeshift housing situation for them because they couldn't just be introduced back into the coop with the big girls. They would have been killed. And so, but oh my God, how freaking adorable are these little buggers? And Sharon was a great mother, and I was the best midwife I could be. So it was really nothing short of a miracle. And, you know, to watch her with her babies, they would all get underneath her and you would never even know that they were there. All 16 of them would go underneath her body and stay warm and hide from predators at night. And of course, so I set them up in my lanai in a dog crate, so it was safe from everything. But man, it was just really something else. And filthy. I had to mop in my lanai every single day. So this is how we ended up with 20 chickens and the original rooster. But the problem now was that how many of them from this new baby flock are going to be roosters? As I mentioned, males are pretty useless in the egg-laying business, and their fate is instant death in a factory farming situation. It's really no difference than a baby calf, a male baby cow in the milk industry. They're just not useful if they don't produce milk. So when a baby calf is born and it's a male, it's instantly taken from the mother. And, you know, if you're having trouble giving up cheese, just watch a video where this is actually happening. And believe me, you will quit cheese in a heartbeat. The males are all disposed of in a horrific, terrible way. And so anyway, this was back in October, and they were probably about a week old by the time Sharon brought them to me. And now here we are, first week of April, and they are just about 5 months old. And it turned out we actually had 9 roosters and 7 hens out of the entire flock. So we quickly had a problem on our hands. You cannot have that many roosters together as they start to get older. Like, their juices start flowing, that testosterone is pumping, and they will fight each other. And they could really hurt the hens too, because they just get really aggressive with their rooster ways. And 9 roosters had to go. But where? I mean, nobody wants roosters. At least not for any good reason. I mean, I don't know if cockfighting is still a thing, but you can't be sure where these birds are going if you just give them away to anybody. And so I just had no idea what would become of them, and I didn't want to do it like that. But I swear, I have said it before, I have an angel watching me, because every time I'm in the face of like this desperate situation, somebody is brought into my life that's like a godsend. And so a friend of mine alerted me to a rooster rescue not far from me. Like, I can't even believe that this is a thing. And so I'm probably the luckiest person on earth, because this guy just retired. He has a feed store, and he was taking like excess roosters. It turns out he has like 30 acres of property with 200 hens already. And so he gladly took my excess roosters. And I know we could get into a whole conversation about like that, and oh my God, 200 hens, and like, you know, the constant just breeding of these animals is a problem. So anyway, he took my excess roosters, and I just could not believe my luck. But we definitely have to make sure that this does not happen again. And, you know, that's the other problem with keeping a rooster. Like I said, we, in retrospect, did not need to have a rooster. but we thought for protection from hawks and, if they're out in the big wide open backyard, the rooster would definitely protect them from predators. But, after having them for a year, we have a very secure chicken fenced in yard. The coop that they sleep in is locked tight at night. And when they go out to free range in the yard, I'm constantly with them. So, but, excuse me. But we do love our rooster. Rudy is a really good boy, and he's such a good protector, and he's just a really good boy. So, I mean, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't, in hindsight, I would never do this again. But knowing what I know now about roosters, we really did not need that. And we never would have had 16 more babies had we not gotten the rooster. So, you see if the eggs won't hatch unless they're fertilized, just like a woman's egg. You can't have a baby without a male. And we have this very active rooster. And now I love these chickens because I love all animals. But again, I would not do this again. Not only for the reasons I mentioned about the whole vegan spin on it, but this is an incredible amount of work and it is not cheap. I am up every day at the crack of dawn to let them out of their coop, feed, water, give them a walkabout for grass and bugs. Then it's the raking of the coop and scooping of the poop, the incredible amount of poop. It's an all-day job. And the cost of chicken feed, now of course I'm buying non-GMO and organic, it's just really expensive. We can't plan to go anywhere for more than a few hours because, the chickens. They are an all day long responsibility, and maybe I'm super OCD about it. Maybe some people just leave them and don't even care, but I am just really that chicken mom. I'm constantly over top of them. So I really don't get to relax until dusk because that's when they all go into the coop as soon as night falls. So all in all, they are an absolute pleasure to watch and to see their little personalities. And I do love them so much, but no, I would not recommend this. On the other hand, if a wild fowl flew into my yard and wanted to live there, yeah, I would love that. But, the funny thing about that is that animals don't need us. They are totally self-sufficient, and only once we interfere with the natural process does it all go off the rails. For instance, I mentioned the incredible amount of poop and the constant cleaning and raking that's required to keep their chicken yard and their coop clean and bacteria and disease-free. And so I used to say, oh my God, these chickens are so filthy. But when I actually thought about it, no, they're not filthy. They're only dealing with these conditions because humans decide to take them and coop them up and confine them to a small space. And that's where the problems arise. I mean, think about the zillions of birds right now outside your window, flying in the sky, in the trees, just everywhere. There's not a poop or disease problem, is there? No, you very rarely see bird poop anywhere. Am I right? No, it's only when humans encroach upon the natural order of things and start taking what's not ours and caging and enslaving the animal kingdom is where we create these problems. So I guess you can say I now understand this on another level than I had before. And that's why we're here, right? It's all a learning experience, and sadly, I've learned some lessons at the animal's expense, which is why I'll always believe they're here for us to evolve. As our pets show us unconditional love in a way that we have a hard time comprehending and actually carrying forth to our own human brothers and sisters. So when I say to these little animal souls as they make their exits, don't worry, precious little one, you'll come back as something greater because you've evolved in your short little time here. No, we have it all wrong. I will evolve to something greater than this because I have been blessed with the experience of sharing an existence with these awesome creatures we call animals and pets. So That has been my experience as a vegan with backyard chickens. Definitely comment below and tell me your thoughts about this whole thing. What has been your understanding about it? Do you agree with my perspective on this? And I do want to say I'm not trying to start wars in the comment sections with vegans and non-vegans about eating eggs, as you know, those topics get really heated. And I'm also not trying to start a health topic about whether eggs are good for you or not. Like, I'm somebody who eats cake every day, so I am not trying to argue for anybody's health right here. Let me just stay in my lane. My favorite meme is the one that says, I love animals, not myself, okay? All right, everyone, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and until the next one, happy vegan baking. Bye for now.